Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 14 Monday Night Football edition. A preview of the Bengals at the Dallas Cowboys as both teams play out the stretch, and a recap of some of what we saw transpire already through the Week 14 schedule. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, I want some of whatever the Kansas City Chiefs have been eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because that horseshoe is lodged right where it needs to be.
Man, what's wrong with you?
I mean, look, I can only handle the it factor for so long. Number 15 deserves a world of credit for making good decisions, extending drives, putting Kansas City in a spot to win games, but somewhere along the way you have to make a deal with the devil when even special teams are going your way, with field goals banging off of uprights, block field goals in the waning moments of the game, but everything is coming up roses for Andy Reid and company.
I left that out there. You could have taken it so many different places, and you went right back to...
Oh, yeah, I was going right back to it.
Bashing the Chiefs.
I'm not bashing. I'm saying that they're living on the razor's edge, and somewhere along the way, you wonder when you flirt with disaster in one-score games despite winning 107 of them in a row, when Lady Luck may go, you know what, we're going to pull the rug out from underneath you, and if it happens in an AFC playoff game.
3rd and 10. The old navigation of the pocket, the jump pass to Worthy, and the legend continues. Joking aside, I think with that game, and in general, we've had some points of contention with the Chiefs. Left tackle situation, cornerback situation. Those are still questionable. We saw Humphreys, which everyone was basically put him in the Hall of Fame once he decided to start for the Chiefs last week. And really, this is going to take some time. He hasn't played football in hasn't played football in a year. And we saw late in that game, it looked like he was fatigued and went down, and he came out, and Wanya Morris finished the final game-winning drive there. So we'll see what comes of that. Without Ladd McConkey, though, we had discussed how different that Chargers offense was. Number 2 in passing success rate when Ladd McConkey gets targeted. That dips all the way down to 27th with anyone else. There were guys running wide open in that secondary. What's so interesting to me about that game, it's like the encapsulation of the entire season. It's been a weird one. And so you viewed that game differently than maybe even reality. So Ladd McConkey, to me, being out is the horseshoe up the Chiefs' ass, not the actual
That's
game.
Fair. That's
31
one way to spin it with an injury, with injury luck before the game even kicks off.
Yes. The 31-yard field goal, you kind of close your eyes and make those. Did it hit the post? Yeah, it hit the inside of the back part of the post when it went through the uprights. It was so long enough where it hit the stadium wall in the back, so it wasn't really close to missing. They're up 13-0. If you look at the adjusted box score, the Chiefs were plus 11 net success rate yesterday. The adjusted box score had them winning the game by a touchdown. What's wild to me about that game is there was a battle. We talked about it on Thursday. Some sharp Chiefs money last Monday at like 3.25. Gets to 4, and everyone's banging the drum for the Chargers. The game closes 5.5 some places. Right? When it's 13-0 at halftime and we just saw Herbert hobbling around, if you went to every Chargers plus 4 backer and said, hey, we'll give you your money back on a refund, they're going to be like, well, what's the catch? And somehow they cashed their ticket. And this is basically the synopsis of this very, very bizarre season.
Well, I mean, you want to segue from that into another game that we saw unfold in the betting market where the market took money on one team like it already knew the final score. And for the second time in 3 weeks, the market couldn't have been more wrong in what transpired down in the desert. Arizona seeking a measure of revenge against the Seattle Seahawks. We saw Arizona get bet from +1 to -1.5. Couldn't get things going offensively 3 weeks ago in Seattle. And yesterday, we see the game go from 2.5 throughout the course of the week to 3 -20. And Arizona, the dead wrong side yet again against the Seattle Seahawks.
So there was some midweek money at some of the threes, but it went back down to 2.5. And
some
again,
good point. It did go from 3 to 2.5.
Yeah.
But some shops didn't flinch off the 3.
They did not. But there was, I would say, the vast majority were down to 2.5. So you could have laid 2.5 again as the week went on and limits increased. But that just gradually went back to 3. And before kickoff, there's some 320 out there. There's 315 out there on Arizona. And there's no other buyers on Seattle at that point. And the game is not close. Box to wire. We saw that.
Same matchup again.
Seattle defense really got to Kyler. You remove the one explosive touchdown to Wilson to start that game, and it was struggle city. So, listen, there are parts of that game where you say, hey, this is a little bit closer maybe than things look, right? You look at just net success rate. It was pretty much even between Arizona and Seattle. What we did see, though, was Seattle's offense did a good job. Like, Geno didn't take a sack yesterday. There's one thing we outlined on Thursday. Hey, holding on to the ball for 4 years behind that offensive line and not taking off and using your legs. There wasn't the catastrophic mistake that Geno made. But all in all, I thought Seattle goes in there, box to wire. Well, it wasn't a good day for one of our bets. Certainly, we get there with the Seattle win total over 7.5, so makes up for some of that. At this point, it's just about compiling wins anywhere you can
and
find
Seattle
it.
Taking money against here as we record on a Monday morning. You mentioned the game. We may as well go to the scene of the crime and discuss some of the market movement there as well. Between the Bears and 49ers, we, of course, gave out the Bears +4. Game trends all the way down to a field goal, so you get the closing line value you're after, especially around a key number. You mentioned a prominent shop goes to -3, -106, and the number gets absolutely zero buyback, no appetite whatsoever for the 49ers. And you want to talk about box to wire? What's one step better than being box to wire? Because that's what the 49ers did to the Bears, dummying them up completely. At one point in that first half, 310 yards for the 49ers. The Bears had 2.
So, going to kind of dance around this a little bit because it was a weird spot. Let's put it that way. Some of our vocal listeners were like, boy, that was delivered with some trepidation. You're kind of buying the idea that this Super Bowl contender who has kind of showed spots of less effort throughout the course of the season was going to deliver something similar to that, right? No one actually got to 4 on this game. It was just a compilation of injuries and wondering what if. And, my number didn't get there. But what was bizarre is again, you're right. It's 4 on Thursday. The thing closes 3 -06. And there is not a single buyer of market influence putting that on the screen. Maybe someone will say, hey, there's a sharp group we book and we get them accounts behind the scenes that finally nibbled on San Francisco. The thing did not flinch on the screen. There was no buys at forward-facing books on the screen at San Francisco at 3, which was... And it just goes out there box to wire. It's not remotely close.
Nope. But one move that did get home, and it got home despite their defense yielding 42 points, was the most entertaining game of the day. They bet the Los Angeles Rams down from 4.5 to a soft 3.5, like they knew the final score. Rams get out to an early lead and were able to hold on for dear life. 44-42 the final. Buffalo becomes just the second team not named the Cincinnati Bengals this year to lose a game when they score 40-plus points. What'd you make of not only the market pocket movement there, but some of the matchups we saw on the field as Sean McVay puts together a masterpiece in terms of playing a bit of keep away and letting their offense finally start to hum with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and, of course, Kyren Williams.
It's a game that we strongly considered, but you don't love giving out games a point after the move. And so maybe we've been a little bit too nitpicky with that and finding other things that maybe we don't like as much, but our listeners aren't getting the second or third number. This was a game that we strongly considered. The blueprint we discussed and laid out was kind of playing that keep away. Because if you just look at EPA per play, I mean, Buffalo was fantastic in that regard. 0.2 EPA per play to the Rams, 0.05 EPA per play. But the success rate was about equal. The Rams 51% success rate, but they just played keep away. And then obviously in a game like that, hey, you get the punt block for a touchdown. Regardless, the Rams were the right side by the adjusted box score. It was basically a coin flip game. So anytime you can get a coin flip game at 3.5 where the projected final should have been tied, you're loving that. The Bills were super explosive without some of their weapons. That was an interesting spot, a very difficult one, and I thought Buffalo showed well for the situation.
Yeah,
two of your horses are still out on offense.
They
right?
battled
you had
too.
the weird
they
spot.
could have easily folded the tents down 31-14
Easily.
and gone, you know what, we clinched the division. The hell with it. We're going to move on to starting to focus on the Lions. But that was anything but what we saw transpire in that second half.
Battled back, showed some life. I mean, that's the Buffalo grit right there, and they were in position to maybe even make things a little bit more interesting. That was if you're a Josh Allen fantasy owner, you love that sneak
or an MVP
from the 1 yard
holder.
line. Yeah, you love that sneak from the 1, but you don't get in, and you end up having to burn an additional timeout. So that needed to be 4 passes from there, but. Listen, I think this is the interesting barometer here against the Lions this upcoming week. Certainly a game we will deep dive on Thursday.
For sure, and the Rams will see if they're able to follow up some of their momentum against the aforementioned 49ers on Thursday night. Should be a fascinating matchup, knowing that Kyle Shanahan has typically gotten the best of Sean McVay. Both teams' playoff futures hanging in the balance in a de facto elimination game. But Payne, Monday Night Football pits the Cincinnati Bengals against the Dallas Cowboys, and this is anything but an elimination game because the Cincinnati Bengals, for all intents and purposes, going to need a whole lot of good fortune and to run the table if they're going to get into the playoffs. And the Dallas Cowboys, even in the much maligned NFC, going to need some help as well. Cincinnati, a 5.5-point road favorite here. There are some 5s, even a 4.5 popping up at a prominent shop out here in the desert. Total, we'll call it 50, painted across the board. And the Bengals, they have the dubious distinction of 4 losses this season when scoring 33-plus points. The rest of the NFL coming into Week 14 had one such loss. As we mentioned, the Bills became the second team, not named the Bengals, to lose when scoring that many. 4 losses when scoring 33-plus this season, most in a season in NFL history. The Bengals, 27.9 points per game in losses this season, most in the NFL history with a minimum of 5 losses. They've scored 99 points over the last 3 games. All of those have been losses. Jamar Chase, some interesting comments saying it just feels like a regular day at work. It just feels like a regular day. You just know your outcome. It still feels like a regular day. You just know the outcome that's going on. Not quite sure what to make of that particular comment when Joe Burrow more or less says we're going to see exactly what guys want to continue to fight down the stretch. A coach whose job status may or may not be in jeopardy, but some changes no doubt coming around the Bengals. Meanwhile, for the Cowboys on the flip side, they're 0-4 against the number as a home dog this season, failing to cover by a ghastly 18.5 points per game. The Cowboys, when they play on Monday Night Football with Dak Prescott, very good. When they play with a quarterback not named Dak, not very good, as the ATS numbers will indicate. And if you're an over-better, well, Monday night has been your night to get out of Dodge. We've seen Monday night totals cash at one of the highest rates ever in league history, a far cry from the trend that has emerged on Sunday Night Football, where more often than not, points are at a premium. Payne, the Bengals, this is a team that's shown an ability to score with the best of them. They may not come up with a timely drive late in games, and stops have been optional. Taking on a Cowboys team getting a little bit healthier on the defensive side. We'll get Jake Ferguson back in the fold on the offensive side, but so many interesting matchups to try and dissect here. The biggest question you wonder is why the NFL didn't flex this out of Monday night, but when you have the chance for the Cowboys and the Simpsons get involved, it is definitely not moving off of its primetime standalone slot to cap Week 14.
So, for our listeners, a little bit of an abridged podcast today. I have an appointment, so we're cutting this a little bit quicker. I think one thing that maybe we should have discussed right before this, but we can tie in here because it's one of those games that fits the mold. These have become very difficult, these games, right? I mean, there is a handful of halves in the NFL right now. There's probably two handfuls of teams that are battling, and about half the league is running out incompetence and or isn't attempting to truly win. And I know that'll be viewed with some disdain from others. But like, think about the Giants yesterday. Somehow they covered. Had a chance to send it to overtime, but the Giants didn't play guys that could have played. Brian Daboll was oddly less aggressive in obvious go-for-it situations that he always takes, and maybe it's a one-week sample size, but you think about all the bottom feeders here, Todd, and what they did on offense yesterday, right? Titans 6 points, Jaguars 10, Giants 11, Raiders 13, Browns 14, Panthers 16, Bears 13, much to our chagrin, Saints 14. Really only the Jets that exceeded their share of their team total from that
Panthers
group
a team
of,
that's shown some fight, though. I will say that for them.
They have. But, and so like this impacts totals, right? If one team isn't pushing the other, even if a model shows value, it takes two to tango more times than not.
Great point.
And, you know, we discussed how bad it's been for the non-SGP books the last 6-7 weeks off air earlier this week, and you know the public's rolling out of bed an hour before kickoff and just moneyline parlaying large favorites and cashing tickets, and traditionally, you know, not the most lucrative proposition. But if 10 to 15 teams are going through the motions, and shit, you look at this week coming up, we didn't do a look ahead line segment, but like the 1 p.m. slate for week 15, the home dogs are like the Saints, Jaguars, Titans, Giants, Browns, Panthers. Who wants a Giants ticket this week?
Apparently no one, with the Ravens now being bet at 14 out to 15 on a Monday morning.
And that's why, you know, the public has kind of been cleaning up the last 2 months or so. It's been that, and I'm not, you know, you need the public, right? If it was only winners out there wouldn't be sports books. But I kind of circle that back in here, and certainly Dallas showed a ton of fight on Thanksgiving against a division opponent. It's Monday night here. I think you go into this with the idea that both teams are going to fight, right? And I think you hinted at Joe Burrow's comments, but he said all the right things. I think we mentioned it on last Monday's recap where he left a not-so-subliminal message to the locker room in his post-game presser, and he said the playoffs are out of reach. But these reps are very valuable to prove you can be counted on going forward. We'll learn a lot about who we have in the locker room, the guys we can count on going forward, and the guys that we can't. I think the next 5 weeks are going to say a lot about who we can count on and who we can't. So those are pretty interesting comments. So Joe's basically put it out there. It's best you show up. There are some moving parts with injuries. Left tackle Orlando Brown tried playing through that fibula injury against the Steelers after a month-long absence, 4 or 5 weeks. Didn't go well. Could barely move. 10% pressure rate allowed. He's out tonight. So there's going to be some shuffling along the Bengals offensive line. The one thing Dallas has done well this season is get pressure. 4th in the league in pressure rate, despite Micah Parsons only playing 8 games and a slew of other injuries along that defensive line for Dallas. Burrow, though, has lived with pressure his entire career. So he's been very good against it this season. He's one of those quarterbacks that we like who is willing to attack the attacker. Burrow's ADOT against the blitz increases by more than 4.5 yards. 9% big-time throw rate under pressure, 11 touchdowns to just 1 interception when pressured. So the one thing the Cowboys do well defensively might be negated at times tonight. And when the Cowboys don't get pressure on defense, it's a bottom 10 unit. Deron Bland has returned. That should help. He's been great his first 2 games. Jordan Lewis has been having a very, very good season relative to what he is. Trevon Diggs is questionable tonight, so something to monitor. A lot of the matchup-based stuff is a little tougher to project, right? Chase and Higgins are in line for good games. That's just kind of what they're in line for in this type of system. But Bland back distorts some of the priors defensively for the Cowboys secondary. Diggs status impacts things. Gesicki, you'd be shocked, right, for an ancillary player, how much of a focus has been on him from professional prop bettors this season.
Well, he's been undervalued when T. Higgins was out. That's for damn sure, looking at the over-unders that are set every week there.
That's the move, right? He's been a buy when Higgins isn't around. And then all of a sudden, the numbers start to tick up, and then T comes back, and he's been a sell when Higgins is there once the market kind of got him to a point where it maybe wasn't reality. Now, he had a good week last week, but it was on limited snaps. Dallas has done a good job not allowing tight ends to get involved a lot, but when they do get the ball, the production there has been elite, so there's some variance within that specific matchup. The other side, you have a Dallas offense that's beaten and battered, right? Zach Martin's out. Tyler Guyton has not practiced all week. He does carry a questionable designation. I guess we'll look for that. CeeDee Lamb sat most of the second half on Thanksgiving with his shoulder injury, but this is a Bengals defense that is more than gettable. Full season now 29th in schedule adjusted efficiency, bottom 6th in the league, both against the run and pass. Last 3 weeks, 51% of offensive snaps the Bengals defense has faced have been successful. They're giving up 18% of a point every time their opponent snaps the ball. And you look, they're dealing with some injuries on defense, the Bengals, right? Rankins is out up the middle. Green dot, Logan Wilson on IR. Dax Hill and DJ Turner have been on IR. Turner more recently. That's been impactful. But then you also think about the other side of the coin, Todd, and the Bengals are dropping down in class, right? I mean, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, rejuvenated Russell Wilson the last 3 weeks. It's Cooper Rush tonight. There are certainly ways to attack the Bengals defense better than others. Typically, heavy sets have worked extremely well. We saw that with the Steelers' game plan. Art Smith had one of his best game plans that I can remember in a long, long time going up against the Bengals defense. Everything was really perfect using those heavy formations and getting Calvin Austin involved downfield over the middle. I can say personally I have not touched this game yet, but the guys that I exchange information with, it's basically been a Dallas or pass that's come across the desk, and that is why we have gone from 6.5 down to 5, and as we're recording this right now, you're watching circa down to 4.5. So a pretty good indicator of where professional money has been. But again, watching yesterday, I'm not getting all that excited over the Drew Lock data point on Thanksgiving.
No, I wouldn't be either. I mean, Drew Lock looked like he was completely a fish out of water throwing against that vaunted Saints defense.
And that's what I'm saying. So, now all of a sudden, Dallas's performance on Thanksgiving, it's like, is the defense actually back, or was that Drew Lock? So, and now you're having that conversation not at 6.5, but 4.5.
Well,
and so it gets difficult here. The season's been very, very funky in that regard.
You've led us down an interesting path, and I think it bears a little bit of follow-up discussion real quick on the total as well, because this was a Bengals team early in the year, and we saw them in a lot of standalone time slots taking under money, most notably the game against the Washington Commanders. You and I couldn't figure it out on a Monday night along with anybody else, and that game goes flying over the total. Even last week, the Bengals take under money against the Steelers, and that game is over by the half. talking about stepping down in class, and here we are with a bigger total, asking Cooper Rush to try and turn this into a track meet, even with the Cowboys defense that may be trending up. I think that's an interesting number as well, now sitting in kind of no man's land at 52. 50,2, not 52.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're in no man's land, right? And so the question becomes, I'm nearly certain this look-ahead line was what? 44 and a half? 45? So there's been the adjustment made. And so, like, what's the buy point back? Are we getting to 51, the key number? Is that going to entice some people? That was the number on the Rams game that people were looking for, 51. Fortunately, never got there for those that were looking to go under. One thing that we have seen, and I go back, and it's why I kind of led into this game with it, because there are a handful of halves, and then there's, two handfuls of teams still battling, and then half the league, who knows what they're doing. It feels like it's led to a larger delta in potential outcomes. And certainly you can give me a million examples of things that have transpired over the last handful of years, but I cannot remember, at least the information that's come across my desk, Todd, where you're getting Arizona all freaking week. It moves from 1.5 to like 3.25, and it's not close.
No.
I mean, you're watching the Bears get absolutely schwacked with no resistance. It's not even close.
Nope, dead nuts.
And
wrong
so
side.
there is, there is a lot of weird things going on in this league right now. And I even go back to the Atlanta-Minnesota game that we discussed on Monday, and how there was certainly an avenue, and I think we said it on the show, where it's like, hey, if Kirk Cousins is beaten and battered here and not 100%, the Vikings winning by 3 scores is certainly in the cards. They go out and win by 3 scores, and I'm not saying that to pat ourselves on the back. Look at the freaking box score. Look at the yardage. Look at the down-to-down success rates. It's a 1-point game by the adjusted box score.
What? You mean it doesn't happen all the time, Payne, that a team can lose by 3 touchdowns despite having 7.1 yards per play, out first downing their opponents? They did lose the turnover battle again, but just wild stuff on a variety of fronts.
If you look at the adjusted box score, the Falcons were a 1-point winner. They lose by 3 scores. It's very difficult to peg right now. I'm sure there are some guys that are winning. Every season there's someone that sees the board better than others, that's in a groove. But across the board, from what we have exchanged with other groups, what we've heard from other groups, what we're hearing from the sharp sports books on the ground, like it's been a disaster for about 2 months here. So
that it has.
I can't remember a time where I've had so many WTF moments in like the 17 years of doing this at a very high level.
You always come to an inflection point in every market, and it's always a question of what data point pushes you over the edge, and you kind of assess the process and figure out how you can be better, make adjustments on the fly, or come back stronger. The wildest part about all of the inconsistency we've seen week to week, season-long portfolio is as good as it's ever looked.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. I was looking at the market here. What looks as good as ever?
I'm saying, yeah, from a week-to-week standpoint, the results have been downright horrific,
okay,
but the season-long stuff has been as good as ever.
Yeah, which is bizarre, right? Because you come into the season what appears to have been a very good gauge on some of these teams. So, yeah. Little bizarre from that standpoint.
But before we officially close up shop on a Monday, we do have an actionable element to get our loyal listeners to the window, and it involves a secondary piece of the Cowboys offense from our prop guy, Billy.
Good morning, Bet the Board listeners. We are back for our Week 14 Monday Night Football prop. This one's going to be pretty short here. Game between Dallas and Cincinnati. We're going to go with Cavante Turpin over 13.5 rush plus receiving yards. That is option 1. Option 2 would be over 11.5 or even 12.5 receiving yards. I'm okay with either option there. What I personally did is split that position. So, look, every week Turpin seems to be showing more and more of his skill set, not just as a kick returner, but as a wide receiver. And now he gets a chance to do that versus one of the worst defenses in football. Bengals are 28th in defensive average target separation. And over the last 4 weeks, and this includes coming off a bye versus that Pittsburgh game, they're 30th in defensive dropback EPA. They're struggling to tackle. If you watch that game versus Pittsburgh, guys were flying wide open in the secondary. It's really a tough look for Lou Anarumo and this defense as a whole. Not sure what's going on there, but what we know is this. They came off a bye and the results got worse. So this is not something that seems to be fixable this year. This defense is just pure putrid. They're just terrible. 11 receptions for Turpin in his last 5 games, just a tick above 2 a game. And with his speed and explosiveness, it feels like this is a matchup we could see Turpin break one for 15+. Dallas was pretty creative on Thanksgiving versus the Giants, getting him the ball with push passes. He got opportunity with some screens with blockers, and it worked. They had success with it. So I would expect them to go back to that well. Finally, let's look at the game script here. Let's look at the side, the total. Dallas 5.5-point underdog. 49.5 is the total. Should be a high-scoring affair, as almost all Bengals games are, and there's probably a decent chance Dallas is trailing in this game once or twice. So I'm not quite sure the extent to which Dallas can actually stop Cincinnati, so it feels like the opportunities for a game where we see Turpin run 10-plus routes is high, and when he's on the field, they like to get him the ball. So once again, we're going to go Cavante Turpin. Again, I split this position. Half of my position was over 13.5 rush plus receiving yards. Half of it was 11.5 over his receiving yards. That's good to 12.5. Best of luck, guys. Let's get back on track.
Cavante Turpin, Payne, our old nemesis.
I don't think a lot of people know that, but he's been our nemesis this season due to his rapport with Cooper Rush. And yes, Brandon Cooks is back, and Turpin only ran, I believe it was 10 routes on Thanksgiving, but there really aren't, especially if CeeDee Lamb isn't 100%, there really aren't any game breakers on Dallas's offense. So if he gets the snaps, this is good, right? If he doesn't get the snaps, then you're going to need that explosiveness to continue. Again, on those 10 routes he ran, because he has that rapport with Cooper Rush, having worked together with the second and third team offenses all season, was targeted 5 times on the 10 routes, led the team in yards. And then there's obviously the element of the run game, end arounds, quick pitch stuff. So digging in the crates. Did not expect Cavante Turpin to show up, but it makes a lot of sense, especially if you're playing catch-up in this game.
For sure. Coming from a negative game state, they'll need all hands on deck. We'll see how healthy CeeDee Lamb is as well. Dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury that kept him out for the latter portions of that Thursday game against the Giants. You figure 10 days should be a little bit healthier, but always some things to monitor. All right, my good man. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, albeit in a short period of time, about some industry concepts, some of the market movement, and the overall level of weirdness that we have seen. Anything else that you would like to add? I want to remind our listeners, by the way, no Wednesday college show this week, just Army-Navy on the docket. We will, however, be back on Thursday to preview NFL Week 15.
Army getting steamed out to 7 this morning. You think that's real?
I mean, it doesn't feel real to me unless you're going to tell me that Horvath is officially out, as the total coming down suggests going on at the same time. But
Interesting.
Something.
No, other than that, other than that, back Thursday. No college football this week with just Army-Navy, and then Wednesday the 18th, round 1 of the college football playoffs with Brad Powers. Looking forward to that.
Should be a lot of fun. 4 marquee matchups. We'll, of course, hit on some of the other bowl games as well throughout the course of the postseason. But with the expanded college football playoff, that will no doubt be our focus. So for Payne Insider, you can follow him on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. And, of course, our prop guy, Billy, you can follow him at Watt_05. Best of luck with all of your Monday Night Football investments as they surround the Cowboys-Bengals showdown. And hopefully we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.